Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonkson, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Today we're talking with Pastor Clyde. He's a good buddy of mine in New Mexico. I've been coaching him for quite some time. And today we're talking about a subject that we all deal with, battling insecurity. Let's check out this week's episode. How can I serve you today, man?
Yeah,
what's on your mind?
I've really been processing a few questions, just thinking about, obviously with things that we've gone through in the past, and I know that we're not the only pastor to go through that, but when we get hurt, like in the church, or people leave, which is the number one thing that just seems to devastate pastors is how do you keep dreaming in the midst of being hurt, and I don't want to sound like I'm bleeding, because that's not the case, but right. There's emotional hurt that we carry as pastors and leaders, and sometimes it's hard to be like, man, well, people left, and so how do we dream for the future?
Well, yeah, you're right. Ministry, hey, like my buddy Sam Chan says, if you're not bleeding, you're not leading. Yeah. It's just part of the way it is. It is true. It's unfortunate, but it's true. I think you look throughout the Bible. Every leader seemed to bleed a little bit. There always seems to be some challenge that they were facing. So you're right. As pastors, we just face it. It just comes in different times and in different ways, but it's true. And then the hard thing is like, how do you keep dreaming in the middle of all of that? And one of the things I think is Clyde, is that I think there's a challenge with us as pastors of what we allow to shape our lives. What we allow to become part of our lives, what we allow to stick to our lives. So that comment, that text, that hurtful word that someone says, it ends up, we allow it at many times to shape who we become. And we're all going to get the negative text or the negative emails or the little comments in the offering or whatever. We're all going to get that stuff. But what happens is we allow it to shape how we feel about ourselves. We allow it to affect our future. We allow it to affect our dreaming, like you're talking about. Yeah. One thing you and I have talked about before is just because someone has presence in your life doesn't mean they have passage to it.
Right.
And that's a thought that I think that we all need to grab a hold of as leaders. Yeah. Is there's people that are going to have presence in your life, family members. We all got family members. They got presence in our life, but it's like, it's like they're always going to be your family member. Right. There's certain people that are going to be at your church. There's certain leaders that are going to, be around town. You're going to see them in the grocery store. I mean, there's going to be a presence, but whether they have passage to our life, that's completely up to us. Yeah. And I think it's not so much, just start dreaming and whatever, but it's a matter of managing our insecurity, managing what people say to us and how we take it and how we let it stick to us. If we let them have passage to our life and every word shapes us either to insecure or secure or fearful or courage, if we just allow everything to shape us, then man, we're gonna constantly be facing that. We're gonna be dreaming and going good, but as soon as one little thread unravels in our life, and we get all insecure and get all upset, and feel like the world's coming to an end, man, we are gonna spend very little time dreaming if it's our way, or if it's our kind of way that we operate. So, my thought to you is, I agree with you. We're all bleeding. I agree with you that we face different issues. I agree with all the challenges. I think one, a leader has to have courage to keep dreaming. You've got to realize that there's a lot on the line, and there's a lot of people that need to follow us, and there's a lot of kingdom issues on the line, and so we've got to keep moving forward. But I think the way that we can help do that is to begin to manage that insecurity and say, hey, you got presence in my life. Yeah. I mean, you got presence. I'm going to see you around town. I'm going to see you at church, whatever. But you don't have passage to it.
Right.
You don't get the chance to shape it. I select who shapes my life. I select who shapes my security or insecurity. So those are just some of the thoughts that I would, off the top of my head. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good, and because I think that is. I mean, obviously we're a smaller community, so you run into people all the time that have left, and I one of the things that I mean. I know I didn't even know pastors struggled with insecurities. That's new to me, but, that's like my number one weakness. Is dealing with those insecurities, and so like when people see you in the store, and they bolt the other way,
Yeah.
or act like you don't even exist. I'm 6'2", 360 pounds. Like you can't miss me. You know. And so it's like, but those things. You're right. I think the presence versus passage thing. I mean that's really good, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What else is on your mind, man?
Well, I think so. Within that, obviously, with people leaving and then new people coming in, and is rebuilding a leadership team that would then turn into kind of my third question. But we'll answer the first one. But so like, how do you rebuild a leadership team in the midst of, again, trying to dream through hurt? So how do you dream for a leadership team where it's something that is, I think before we've created leadership teams that were very, I don't even know the way to describe it, but obviously not strong in the right areas. So when the first storm came, it's like everybody jump off ship. The ship is sinking, and that's not the case, And so I'm looking to try to rebuild our leadership team to a healthy leadership team.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, you and I've walked through. I've been some coaching with you over the years, and you've walked through some tough times. There's no doubt about it. And we all do. But you've walked through some tough times. There's a couple things that I think are important for you, and you and I've talked a little bit about this. One is backing up and realizing at times we confuse faithfulness with quality leadership. So someone might be wonderfully faithful. They can't handle leadership, or they're not really a leader. Maybe they're not really a leader. They're wonderful servants, but they're not a leader. But somehow we slam them into leadership positions. Right. And then we wonder why they don't act like a leader. Hey, when tough times come, they skip out. Well, they're not a leader. You invited a faithful person to the table. You invited a person with a servant's heart, but they're not leaders. Right. And so I think that's one thing. I think that we, in the process, if you look at the whole thing and just like, okay, let's talk about, first of all, who we're inviting to the table. Yeah. Okay, do they have some sort of leadership level to them? Of course, faithfulness, no doubt. Do they exercise loyalty? Do they show, a capacity to grow and develop? I think those are important things that you got to look at, rather than, okay, we're just going to slam anybody on there. And if you're faithful and, be on the team. Right. I think that we need to be a little more careful. Now, I'm not talking about building volunteer teams. I'm not talking about people that help. I think that should be open to. But as you kind of go up the ladder of leadership, I think it needs to be a little bit more vetting and a little bit more careful on who that is. Secondly, is realizing that you got to think of it like a boat. Yeah. The more they're in the middle of the boat, if that boat takes a sharp turn, they'll be okay. It's the ones that sit on the edge of the boat when you take a sharp turn that fall off. Wow. So you got to think about, okay, how do I get my leaders into the middle of that boat? Okay, they're on board with me. They love me. They love God. They're in the vision. They're sold out. I'm pouring into them more and more and more. I'm getting them into the middle of the boat. So when the boat does turn, and it will turn, yeah. We change visions, ideas, concepts, whatever, or hurt comes along, pain comes along, I don't know, whatever. What's going to happen is the people on the edge of the boats, they're going to fall off first. No question about it. And if we think of it that way, okay, I got 10 strong leaders, 15 strong leaders. Are they in the middle of the boat, or are they on the edge of the boat? Yeah. And I think that's an important part The other thing I would say is you got to be talking about getting people to the middle of the boat. When you think about culture and you think about vision, there's 4 levels to it, Clyde. There's those that embrace it. I'm sorry, there's those that know it. Let me say it again. There's those that know it, like we know the culture, we know the vision, we know what being on this leadership. There's those that know it. There's those that embrace it. There's those that defend it. And then there's those that multiply it. So there's that know it, embrace it, defend it, multiply it. And what you want to do is you're saying, okay, they all know it, but that means they're only on the edge of the boat.
Yeah.
As they embrace it and they start to defend. When they start doing that, you're like, man, they're going into the middle. And then now they're multiplying it, man. They're sharing it with others and they're inviting others to the middle of the boat. That's what I think that you need to do. You need to think about like, okay, the leaders I have, are they on the edge of the boat or are they in the middle? Are they just at knowing or are they now at the point of defending and they're standing with me? How do I get them there in the process of all of it? And the one last thing I would say is you had said, hey, when you come out of a rough season, how do you start dreaming again? And we talked a little bit about that, but then how do you start rebuilding a team? Obviously, you need a team. Obviously, you need great leaders. Obviously, you want to get them into the middle of the boat. The one thing I would encourage you is to be careful not to let the shadow of someone else's disrespect or distrust come down onto the life of the current leaders that you have. In other words, what we do is because we all know this, we were hurt by someone else, then we're going to judge this person in the light of that person over there. Sure. You're going to have to learn to trust again. You're going to have to learn to trust leaders again and not judge them in the light of what someone else did. Right. So be careful bringing them in. Be careful bringing them in. Don't just invite anybody. I think it should be an honor to be on a leadership team. Okay, not talking about volunteers but a leadership team. Get them into the middle of the boat, going from know to embrace to defend to multiply, and then make sure that you're not judging them in the light of someone else.
Yeah.
Such an important thing. That's just not fair if you do that.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the mistakes I made early on in leadership, of course, this is the first church I ever was the lead pastor of. So you come in and you're like, man, you're here all the time. You're faithful. That you know what? You should lead a ministry. It's like, and man, I made that mistake so many times, and then it's the moment that they get upset with you or whatever. Not only do they leave, but the ministry that they started or created or were leading dwindles, and then who's the problem? Pastor Clyde's the problem. I think. Shameless plug for your book, but saving your church from itself, was really good. Those 6 styles, of people and different things, have really helped us. We went through that as a team, and really felt like those were to make us more aware of those leaders that are out there, and just understanding. So I think that is really a reminder of how we need to shift on how we do, which I think we've done that. But it's like there's a part of me, because you know me. I am a people person. So it's like people come in. It's like, heck yes, you can be in the inner circle. It's
Come on in.
Yeah, exactly. Come on and hurt me, man. It's you're good. But and so again, I think going back to what you said of not allowing. I don't know. Somebody said the illustration of paint on top of a ladder when it spills, to not allow the splatter to get on to other people as well, and so I think that's a good analogy because sometimes we do, as leaders, we're like, wait, hold on a second. I recognize that personality, and it's like, I'm not going to allow myself to go down that. And we close ourselves off to potentially high quality leaders and servants in the church, So that's really good. I appreciate that, man. Good reminders.
Yep. Yeah. Good.
And
so what else you got?
Partnered with that, the leadership is is creating. I think I've said on a few of your roundtables that have talked about like leadership pipeline type stuff. So we're in this new kind of discipleship program that we started in late December called Kingdom Builders. You and I talked about that, and that is going extremely well. We had our first gathering in December, then we had what we call reunions now. So we had a Kingdom Builders reunion last night, and that's where everybody was supposed to bring somebody. Okay, which everybody that was at Kingdom Builders came last night. The one thing they were forgetting, the somebody. And so the multiplication thing, so again, I think we've been such a church that has been focused on addition rather than multiplication. And so even being able to get them to, like, we've got to be multipliers to create a pipeline so that the same 30, 40 people, 50 people aren't leading the same stuff all the time. So, maybe something on how you can help, maybe give me some insight into developing a leadership pipeline.
Yeah. Well, the two things that I would just quickly say on that is, and one of them I think we've talked about before, but it's worth revisiting. I think you have to create, you got a Yankee hat on, you and I are major Yankee fans.
That's right.
They've got single A, double A, they got multiple single A teams.
Yeah.
Because they're creating a pool of people that they're going to go from single A to double A to triple A. They're trying to raise up talent. But they're creating a very large pool.
Right.
And I think one of the things that we don't do in church, and we need to do a better job in this, is we've got to create a larger pool to pull from.
Yeah.
We've got to start doing that. And so the way that I've done it, I've told you this several times, I've said it on this podcast, and I don't have anything new to say about it, is in the sense of I don't have any new insights, is I am a huge fan of leadership circles. Grab a book, grab 5 people, go through the book together. The thing that I've always talked about with leadership circles, because if you think about it, if you and 4 other people in your church grab 5 people each, we're going to go through a book together. Okay, maybe 2 chapters a month. We'll come together once a month or whatever. At the end of that book, maybe 1 or 2 of those people can spin off another group, and then the other ones remain in that group, And then all of a sudden you fast forward and talking about single A, you got about 60 people having leadership conversations every month in your church. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge pool. But I think what we do is it's funny, we all know leadership's important. We all strive and know it and realize it. But then you ask someone, what are you actually doing to do it? Right. And there's no plan. So my whole thing is, okay, let's talk first about, let's get, in a church of 400, let's get 60, 70, 80 people having leadership conversations every month because they're involved in these leadership circles that I've talked about. Yeah. The other thing is I believe that every one of your team members, it needs to become part of your culture, Clyde, not just, a program, but more part of your culture, where everybody that is a major department leader, youth, children, worship, small group, next steps, whatever, everybody, including you, everybody needs to be apprenticing 1 to 2 people all the time. Right. So the key behind apprenticing is I want to train you to do what I do better than I do it. Right. And then I want to train you to do what I do better than I do it. So think about 1 or 2 worship leaders coming up under the worship leader, coming up to the youth, and fully be an apprentice. Like as in a year from now, you have not 1 good worship leader and then not so good person, but I got 3. So if I want to launch another campus or launch another Saturday night service or whatever, no problem, man. I've got team members to move wherever I want. Right. So I think it would be amazing for you to say as the lead pastor, hey, part of being on this team means this. It's not bottom shelf priority. You duplicating yourself is top priority. Yeah. And then once you duplicate yourself twice over, you find 2 more people. Then you do it again. Then you do it again. If we are as leaders, your main department heads, 2 things. Like if I'm pretending I'm going to take 2 things, guys. I know we have a lot going on. but there's two things. Number one, we'll always have a leadership circle because we should always be having leadership conversations. Number two, we should always be apprenticing one or two people at any time. Remember, you've heard me say a leader's strength is found more in their absence than in their presence. And when you apprentice people, and if you get pneumonia, that's, you're out for 3 months. Well, I've got 3 worship leaders behind me. Yeah. That to me is a pool. That is sort of, here's your single A, your 60 people in leadership circles, 80 people in leadership circles, which literally could happen a year from now for you. Yeah. And then above that, it's like, and right now we got 18 people being apprenticed. Right. You're talking about having a pipeline that's strong. You're talking about every time you have an opportunity to launch another campus or whatever, it's like not a problem. We've got an entire staff that can go over there. Yeah. But the key of all of it is this, and I tell people, don't do it unless you're going to be consistent, because all you'll be telling people on your team that when you're inconsistent is you'll be telling them that leadership really doesn't matter. Wow. And above anything else, you've been in this long enough to know it's all about great leaders. Yeah. If you had 10 phenomenal leaders or 8 on a worship leader, next steps, a children's, a campus pastor, maybe 3 or 4 others, and you're like, and now they're not your staff, but like right below, and they're just quality, like boom, another campus. Then you start apprenticing, boom, another. As well as I know, the old John Maxwell, 30 years, he's been saying it, everything rises and falls on leadership. Yeah. And so I think making it a top shelf priority. Hey, to be on this team means you do 2 things. You have a leadership circles and keep multiplying those out, and you're always apprenticing. You do that, Clyde, and you'll never lack for leaders. And you'll find your culture getting duplicated. Right. Does that make sense?
Good. Yeah, it does. Yeah. If I could just take everything you said and implement it, man, we're going to be golden. that's the thing,
you
man.
Can.
Like, they're so good, and sometimes it feels like you're drinking water from a fire hydrant, and it really does charge me. I'm like, man, I can do that. Like, I know I can do that.
You can.
But and we are, and I think with the coaching has certainly helped because it keeps it at the forefront. There's some accountability that comes with it, and all that. And before, I think when we blew up, when we went from 60 people to 450 people, when we blew up, it was like people are just flooding in. I don't even really have to. I just keep showing up on Sundays, and it's going to be fine, But in that, we didn't build leaders, and we didn't build sustainable leaders, and so. So that is, one of the, our key word. We try to come up with a last year was love God, love people. This year is be intentional, and we are really trying to be intentional with discipleship, and I like the leadership circles term. I like that you said that. So thank you for
this. I love that. Be intentional, and I'd encourage you to do that, man. I think we all need to do that. Be intentional. It's like we leave the greatest thing we need, and I shouldn't say the greatest. I mean, I guess argue that, but arguably in the top 3 greatest things we need to keep moving forward is great leaders, which is biblical. Ephesians 4, we equip the saints. That's our job. Yeah. It's one of the greatest things we need, but we leave it to chance. Now just find someone to fill in that spot. What do you mean just find someone? Did you apprentice them? Like if I was a phenomenal plumber and you wanted to be a plumber, you come walk alongside me for 6 months. If you go through medical school, I'm a doctor and you're a resident, you're going to learn from me for a couple of years. Like, it's what everybody does, but we don't do it in the church. Yeah. Like, okay, you're a worship leader. I'm going to apprentice 3 or 4 worship leaders. I'm going to apprentice 3 or 4 kids ministry. And I'm going to have a bullpen called the leadership circle. If we would just be consistent with that, you're not going to lack. Yeah. And but when we're inconsistent with it, we're scrambling. And when desperation rises, standards fall. So we scramble, we throw a person here, a person there, and that guy can. Well, we're putting 1s and 2s in spots that need 7 and 8s because we're desperate. And desperation rises, standards always fall. And so we just need to be careful with that. And if you can be consistent and intentional about that, I think it'll be a game changer for your future. Yeah. I know it will be. Good. So we should write a book. Man, dude, it is.
We should write a book together called The Bullpen.
The bullpen.
Baseball, nothing but baseball analogies and leadership.
That would be
but
epic.
but everything is baseball, like preferably Yankees. Like
if, if we could get the Yankees to read it and win us a World Series, that'd be great too.
you never know what'll happen, man. Yeah, that's
Dude,
awesome.
I got to jump off the call, but
you.
man, we need to close our time up. But always great talking with you, Clyde. Always great connecting with you. So proud of what God's doing in your life, and keep up the good work.
Man, you're a huge
Yeah.
part of that. Thank you so much, Pastor Chris. We'll talk soon.
Yeah. All right. Love you, bud. Talk to
Later,
you later.
brother. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.